All right, this report here at the Field Report has been one I've been wanting to do this, for about 10 years. And I do believe the mission field is in America. I've always believed this wholeheartedly. I've not known many people, including myself, who've ever had a wage over 20,000. It's an illusion. If you grew up poor, like in many cases, I would include myself, that poverty has its own set of problems. Typically, the things that are symptoms of poverty is alcohol, drug abuse, separation and divorce, abuse at home. This is actually pretty common. This is not something I made up. And it's frightening because now over 50% of Americans are living under poverty. And you think this would happen in another country, okay? It's everywhere. Most people call it like urban housing, rural living. But on average, even children that grow up this way, they don't escape it. A lot of times if you go into some people's homes, the conditions of their homes are not even close to sanitary conditions. It's really difficult to even talk about it, but it's one of the things I think once you find out how much of it is going on in your neighborhoods and your homes. Most people live on bank debt, credit debt. No one really escapes poverty unless you have the ability to educate yourself. Now, you include the elderly, Social Security, all that, and it's such a large number now that on average it's rare. Actually, the number is 20% of the people that do not live under the poverty line are just barely making it. The middle class is eviscerated. Okay, so why do we believe that the only really person that could really maybe turn the economy around is President Trump? I realize a lot of people get into a lot of stories. There's actually more to that than what we're dealing with. If you were to really pull back everything, and I do believe there's a lot of trickery and lies. In fact, if you look at some of the stories in China, they actually build these cities, skyscrapers, but there's no one inhabiting these cities. It's all given this illusion that there's wealth and power. So this is what's going on in America. If you go on a Saturday morning, most of these kids live in conditions. Some of them live in motels, hotels. If you're lucky, these kids might be able to have a safe home or environment. Typically, poverty leads to foster homes and etc. It's the same old routine. It's happening everywhere. We were down south, and I think the poverty can be really extreme in the south just as much as it is in the north. But then you look across the nation, and then you see that a lot of people, if they're working 2 jobs, and if they can't afford it, they'll be able to provide more than the average. Substandard living is a way of life, though. For some of these children, what they do is most of the men are in prison. They're not raising their children. They're not working. And it's a system-wide problem. It's systematic. And it's so sad because really, even some of us who work, or even try to afford the average, just the basics nowadays. Some people make fun of it and they crack jokes at it, but it's really hard to escape poverty. For a woman, it's abuse. I mean, I don't know what women will have to do other than, participate in some kind of extracurricular activities or other things. It's not unusual, okay? Waiting tables, I mean, again, more servitude. But when you see this many men in jail, and then you listen to all the other things that are going on in the news media, how many people really go to jail? A lot of these people are in jail for petty crimes. And then what happens is these kids don't have a dad. And it was always raised, the upbringing is that a man would be the breadwinner, the mother would be able to stay home, and they've tried to reverse the roles, introducing feminism and abortion. And to me, I think once people really understand the whole point to abortion, why abortion may have, like, to me, it's destroyed the moral character of America, taking prayer out of school, all these things that really make America a society that is fit for a family. Up to this point, I mean, you take all these things away from families. You take values, you take tradition, you take the nurturing of a mother that nurtures her children. You take those things away, and really, these kids are even more, they're desperately poor. That's how serious this is getting. It's getting so serious that I guess, somehow, some way, I think every person in America going to be affected by it. If it goes ignored this long, it's sadly, it's not as if you have a choice now. I think it's going to be forced into people's lives, whether they want to accept responsibility for it or not. It's not a whether, it's a matter of doing it. It's a humanity, it's a human issue. Everyone's going to have to somehow pay for it out of their pocket, whether it be in taxes. And to me, the way to take back your country is to take control of the problems that are happening in your community. If you see poor families, reach out to them. Don't wait till the government steps in and does something, because if you listen to people like Bill Gates, I mean, their remedy is just exterminate people. You're looking at the increase of autism and the medications that are out there. It's going to cost the taxpayers in the long run more money in the long run than reaching out to your community. See, there was a reason why back in the beginning of America's, what was rooted in tradition was to take care of your community. The church was the center of that community, to take care of the orphans and the widows. I mean, this isn't my words. This is right out of the Bible. I mean, there was a reason why churches were the center of the community, and families always wanted to stock up the church because they had to provide for the community. And if there was orphan or widows, it was generally a role that the elders would take care and provide in the absence of a father. It's so different today. The absence of the father, a lot of these women are in shelters. They can't get anything more than like urban housing. It should not have been left up to the government. Poverty should be an issue that the church takes care of in America. It should not be left up to welfare and Social Security. That's really the God's honest truth. Our communities are larger and be more fruitful, and overall, if people provided for children and the widow and the elderly, our whole country would be a different place. We wouldn't leave it up to Social Security. It was never meant to be a permanent solution. And people make cracks. They say, well, our tax bracket's more, we get more money. Yeah, but also, I mean, if people would not be in the debt that they're in, because we're leaving up to the government to fix this problem. It's never been the government's problem. It's been the lack of more than enough. I mean, right now the poverty level is so high that people really can't afford to start throwing around numbers right now. Because if you owe more bank debt, you're going to be a slave to the banking system. That's why you're seeing a lot of this new economy begin with the Bitcoin, which I think at this point there's got to be a way out. And America's in a situation right now where we're so far in debt that we won't be able to pay back this debt. So where do you begin? Well, I think you begin right here. This is the concern. See, God made it so that it was up to us to make these decisions to fix the problem here. Means to step up to the plate. There's no other way to put it. I can't have children, so my initial concern is I'm thinking about these kids, and I'm thinking the absence of a mother that's heavily on drugs or whatever. I mean, there might be just a crop of us left that can actually give of our time. I give of my time doing these posts, but actually what I think is happening, and I did this last weekend, I took time to watch a BBC reporter go in and do a documentary on the children of Bulgaria, and it was just incredible. It wouldn't leave me for at least a day or two. What I'm seeing in America, why we started the field report, why we did this, because I've gone into women's shelters. I've experienced both ends of this. And the rate of domestic violence and drug addiction and alcoholism is a huge reason why poverty exists in America, and the breakdown of marriage. And really, the only way families can coexist right now is if they had a family that is supportive. And what you're seeing is that there's a lot of people that have a lot of property will not provide for their own family. And that to me is such an incredible injustice, because, see, I think every person that makes a decision when it comes to your own family and relatives, the idea is to provide, especially if the children are orphaned. And to turn your back on that, to me, is like turn your back on what God has called you to do. You know, we will have to answer for everything in life. People can say what they want, but I think this is the issue today, is that at the rate that we are at, over 50% of America live in a third world conditions. That should scare people. Because if you're the kind of person that's always had a job and you've make over that 20,000 mark, you've at least overcome. But to not take care of children that need a family or feel the obligation, I know there's an enormous responsibility on people to decide whether they can or they can afford it. That is the God's honest truth. People really can't afford to raise children. And if there are children in need that need a family, that would be the obvious reason to become a foster parent. I see a lot of good people that have tried to do that and run into problems as well, but not everybody can do this job, right? Nobody. But there are things you can do, and I think every person lives in a community where there's this much poverty, like looking at cities like Detroit right now, which has already filed bankruptcy. There's 30 other cities in the United States right now that's ready to file for bankruptcy. That should concern every American, because it goes back to America could actually, well, I guess looking back to the beginning when the Puritans prayed for this country, to me it all goes back to when they prayed over this land, and they prayed that it would prosper. But I don't know that America could prosper if we keep accumulating more bank debt and war and men in prison and moms on drugs and the epidemic of a child abuse and domestic violence. That is the problem. To me, as long as there's a caring, loving mother and father involved, that is huge, okay? That means these families need help. They're in crisis, okay? If it's getting to the point where we can't provide for someone or families or do more than just talk about it, but do something, like right now, May 6th, we have a rummage sale, and we're going to start collecting our stuff and just start raising money. I mean, anything at this point. I mean, the thing is if we don't, like my primary job is to take care of elderly, and I do a lot of extra work, and there isn't enough money to fix this. But the more people get involved, then you can really make a difference. To me, this is the issue today. I do believe we have one little window of opportunity, and I do believe President Trump was picked for this job, handpicked for this job. I hope people understand it's not about politics, the epidemic in crime, and then obviously with poverty, because there's a serious problem here, one in which deserves a huge amount of attention, as much as it is to reverse the course that we're on. Because if you were to go back to the time of Jimmy Carter, it was the same thing. Today, by today's standards, it's far worse. I hope we take serious to the issue, what's going on here. It's frightening to see how bad off America is, and how many people are really homeless, and how many people haven't even really told their story about poverty. You can't pretend and sometimes even hide this fact. In fact, most of the middle class are so in debt that they wouldn't be able to accomplish the things that they had hoped to accomplish. They'd have to work 2 and 3 jobs. That, on average, is the case for most people. The burden is extreme on the middle class and the working poor. And then, I mean, that is incredible. And I really hope and pray we can get this right. I really do. It starts with a lot of other things, too. My concern is, are Americans really taking seriously how bad this poverty concern is and the debt in America? Because someone's going to have to pay this debt somehow, some way. That's where faith kicks in. The Field Report is a part of the Amateur Radio Network.